Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome back to another movie review. I'm Chris Garner, joined once again with Tate, and we are continuing our reviews of most of, I don't think we can get them all done, but most of the nominated movies at this 91st Academy Awards. And we are continuing with If Beale Street Could Talk, which is the new Barry Jenkins movie, who actually, his film a couple of years ago won Best Picture, which was, of course, Moonlight, which we have a review for.
Yeah.
Not as many nominations as the likes of The Favourite, which we reviewed last time, which is absolutely sweeping the Oscars this time. This is nominated for 3, but there's still very prominent categories. There's Best Supporting Actress for Regina King, there's Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Original Score for Nicholas Brittle. So we're going to be talking about the nominations, where if we think it will win any, and the movie itself. But before we get into our review, we need to hype up our competition that we've got going on. We are going to be going live, obviously, for our annual watch-along of the Academy Awards. We will have times and dates and everything finalized on our Facebook and Twitter at some point. So best way is to subscribe to those, follow those in the description down below. But we're opening it up to you guys. We want you to send us in all of your predictions, your first and second choice for each category of the Academy Awards. Throughout the night, we'll see who gets the most right, and whoever gets the most right on the night will have the chance to feature on a future episode with us. So you can get those sent in to us at cinemasavvypodcast@gmail.com, or you can just send it into our Facebook. As I said, that's in the description down below. So Tate, with all that being said and out of the way, how are you doing, man?
No, I'm doing really good. Really good. And I'll say this now. This film, I had a teensy bit of hype going into it. As you all know, those famous Oscars. Was it the first year we did the Oscar watch along that happened, or was it the second year?
I think it was the second year.
The second year we did the Oscar watch along with that famous La La Land and Moonlight debacle. If you remember back to the Moonlight review, which you do need to go and watch, I said it was worthy of winning Best Picture, but I really hoped that La La Land won it in the end. And there is still a tiny bit of me that thinks La La Land should have won it outright. But I'm happy to say that Moonlight was a very good film, and possibly the best film of that year in retrospect.
I seem to remember you enjoying Moonlight more than me. I'm not detracting for the themes that movie talked about or anything like that, but my personal preference, it usually goes with the movie that I was most entertained by and had more of a connection to personally. And that movie for me, I mean, me and you almost broke down in tears talking about La La Land in our review.
We did.
Neither of us are ashamed to admit that. That movie really gut punches when that came out. But Moonlight was a fantastic film in its own way. And I mean, that whole ending of that Academy Awards, nothing will ever top that ending with the whole La La Land.
I mean, I still keep on saying we should save the clip of it. Just the moment where George realizes, and then we both cotton onto it, and just everything. Because that was honestly one of the funniest moments, being on the channel and stuff like that.
It definitely was, and I mean, I don't know if we're going to have any moments like that this year. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
I feel like they've refined the process. They don't even have hosts this year, Chris. So
yes, no, that's true. That's true. They really
can't go wrong without a host.
They actually, they've got to get a host at some point, surely.
No, they're just going to have someone reading out the voiceover of, and now introducing the people for the awards.
It's going to be very interesting. Skynet have taken over the Oscars. Yeah. And we're going to be staying up for 5 hours to do it. But yes, if Beale Street could talk, we need to segue strategically back to the movie itself.
The good old IMDb says a woman in Harlem embraces her pregnancy while she and her family struggle to prove her fiance's innocent of a crime. That kind of spoils the first half of the movie, really. That is basically the entire purpose of the first half of the movie. I'd say it's very difficult to spoil this film because there isn't really much that happens that can be spoilable. This is a film about a situation, but not about the results. And it means that it's one of those films which aims to be an experience and put you kind of in the person's shoes of the situation, but doesn't exactly expect you to kind of understand the results of that completely, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally. And we should say as well, I mean, this movie is told in a non-linear fashion as well. But I kind of agree with you. There isn't much going in the story. In fact, if you go on Wikipedia and you click on the plot, it is comparatively short to most movies, how it's written down. Really, inherently, nothing much happens in this situation.
Yeah.
but the strength of the movie itself, and I'll go out right and say it, that I think that Moonlight is definitely a stronger film. We were talking a little bit about this before we went live, comparing the two movies. Both have, you know, similar themes like race relations and everything like that. This one probably more so. I think that was more to do with sexuality in terms of, you know, a given environment, you know, and everything like that. But this one, the crux of it is the interplay with the characters and the dynamic between the two leads and the surrounding people as well, like the two families essentially. And I think the strongest elements of this movie were towards the beginning, where we were introduced to both families, and we had that, you know, it was really tense. There was feuds going between, and that to me was the meat of the story. And that's where I thought the movie was going to progress from there, was this family having to come together. But really, after the first act, that's kind of thrown to the wayside, and we move into a completely different plot point.
I was a little bit upset that they actually didn't follow through with that plot point, because that was the strongest plot point from the very, very start. It isn't really something that we can spoil as per se, but there is a feud at the start between the two families due to the situation of one of the main characters being in jail and the other person basically revealing that she's pregnant. That immediately causes a divide between the families.
And also that the child was conceived out of wedlock as well.
Yes, that's a very, very big part as well to go with that. I found it very difficult to pin down which decade this film was in.
Yeah, no, I was going to bring up that. And I was looking on Wikipedia to see if
80s?
I'd missed it or the date. And, you know, it probably is set at a particular date. But
70s, 80s or something like that.
The way that people dress, the way that things look, the way that the cinematography was as well, the kind of tone of the camera. But I think that the strength of that is, and I like movies that do this, it does have that very timeless quality to it. This could be, say, happening in the projects of today. This could be happening in the projects of the 70s or 80s. And I liked that. I guess someone could like look at it and like the uniform on the police and everything and pinpoint the exact time. But and a lot of films this year definitely do have that timeless quality to it. I mean, we have Black Klansman as well, for example, which at the very end...
I'd say that was heavily the actual main story part. I know that they have the flash forward at the end to kind of show the similar situations, but that is heavily kind of...
But I mean a movie that does sort of transcend different time periods. This one's more ambiguous as to when it's set, whereas, you know, it's very clear when Black Klansman's set, but it still does have that moment at the end where a modern person could watch it and go, oh, I'm seeing similarities of history repeating itself kind of thing. And that's what I think this movie does as well. A lot of films this year have done that, which, you know, is testament to all the directors and the movies that have been nominated.
I'd say if there's one thing that stood out about this film is that with Oscar films, you always have that one film that seems to drag on for a very, very long time. And it's one that you don't inherently say is a bad film, but it's one that you immediately know, oh, give it 3 or 4 years, we're going to completely forget about this film. And I think the best example of that film was Joy from a few years ago. I really like that film. No one remembers it. Absolutely no one remembers it. A couple of years before, Lion, brilliant film. Really enjoyed it. No one remembers it. Absolutely no one remembers it. I mean, I could only really name 4 or 5 films that were nominated last year, but I'll just try and find out which one has become the film that is completely forgotten from last year's Oscars.
But in all honesty, I will probably forget this one as well. Are you saying that this will be that equivalent this year?
This is going to be the forgotten film. I'd say the forgotten film from last year was The Post or Phantom Thread. Either will be forgotten in maybe 3 or 4 years' time.
And it's such a shame that that's Daniel Day-Lewis's swan song. He'll come back. I'm sure he'll come back to do another role. But yeah, what a movie to end it on, right?
I completely forgotten that both of those films were released last year, so it makes it completely puts that into context. This doesn't take away from the fact that I enjoyed Barry Jenkins' directing and his style of direction, something which I picked up from Moonlight and something which I said before the stream, was it might slightly ruin how you see his films in the future. I'm not sure if he'll continue with this trend, but he has nailed the shot of basically face onto the camera with like dust particles in the air. He has absolutely got that shot perfectly down, and he abuses that in both of the films, more so in this film than he did in Moonlight. But other than that, it just seems like maybe the plot wasn't strong enough. Maybe he took a different line with it. It just didn't feel as strong as it could have been. And it could have been a lot stronger as far as the film is concerned.
Now, this is based on a novel by James Baldwin, which, as is most of the time with these scenarios, I haven't read. So I don't know how accurate this is. Apparently, Barry Jenkins was writing the screenplay. Around the time he was writing the screenplay to Moonlight, he was kind of working on both scripts at the same time. So I don't know how accurate this is compared to the novel. But this strikes me that this particular narrative might work better in a novel. To me, I found it difficult of what to gravitate towards and follow. As I said, the movie opens with this family dynamic, which I thought was really strong and which I wish the movie would have either have come back to at the end. I guess you could say that the family dynamic, without giving too much away, evolves into a sort of next generation kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I felt like that needed some kind of payoff, and it didn't. We move into the second act, and it's going into like the judicial system, and it feels like it's going to be a movie like To Kill a Mockingbird, for example.
Yeah.
And then we move away from that, and then we get into the intrigue of what the actual court case is and everything like that. It felt, you do have the through line of the main two leads and their relationship and their love for each other and the circumstances that Stephen James's character finds himself in jail, and the non-linear story shows the lead up to that, which I really enjoyed. I thought that was a good way, effective way of telling the story. But everything else around and the plot itself, I thought was a bit muddled, and it didn't really stick the landing on anything. It showed you the surrounding events, but it didn't really have a true narrative, in my opinion. You're sort of just following these two characters through events, essentially.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
It's so difficult. Honestly, this is so difficult to talk about. Like we've probably been going for like what
20 minutes. Yeah, it's a problem. It's so difficult to talk about. But even if we were to throw in like spoiler words and basically explain out the plot, it wouldn't actually progress how much we were talking about the film.
No,
and maybe that's my one problem with the film. The film doesn't have anything to talk about afterwards. Yeah, it doesn't have anything that completely stands out from other films. You look at the other Oscar films in this year. You've got, look at, I haven't even seen it yet, but Vice. That's all to do with the kind of look from Christian Bale and how he's gone deep into that character. You look at films just off the cuff, such as Roma. That is all to do with family. It's a foreign language film. It has talking points. It has brilliant direction. This film is a middle-of-the-road film that I feel any other year it would have missed the cut for Best Picture. And honestly, you've got to compare this once again to the film that Moonlight was up against. It was up against La La Land, which was Damien Chazelle. If we compare this to First Man, I honestly would rather watch First Man again.
Yeah.
And First Man is a more endearing film, which I'd even possibly say with better acting and better direction.
I was going to say, almost
every element's better.
I was going to raise this question to you. Do you think the two leads in this movie are boring characters?
Extremely boring
characters. They're too inherently good. Like, there's no.
I completely believe the love between them, and I understand that's what we're meant to be focusing on in the film, but they have no individual characteristics.
There's no other personality to them.
Other than they like each other. That's the only personality you know of.
Whereas you had Moonlight, and I'm forgetting the name of the main character in Moonlight. But...
yeah, main character in Moonlight depends. It changes all the way throughout the film. But you've got
well, no, you've got the main guy.
Oh, sorry, Sharon.
Sharon, that's it. So that movie was effective in its structure because you had the 3-chapter stage of his life, essentially moving through the different, into adolescence and everything.
Not only that, you had intricate character moments, like the moment where he stood in the dance studio just spinning around, the moment where he's in the water trying to stay afloat with Mahershala Ali holding him up. Those kind of moments at the start of the film set you up for the entire rest of the film. You know he's a vulnerable character just off that. These two characters don't have any individuality moments. The only moments they spend are based around either loving each other or thinking about how they're going to deal with the child. There's nothing individual to them. Their character is set in their own ways, and that makes it really difficult to kind of follow them. There's nothing you can connect to them at all. Absolutely
I did think in this movie as well, and this is kind of the last thing I'll say because I really don't have much else to say. I did like the music, by the way. I will mention the music.
Oh, yeah, the score could. I mean, the score's up against Black Panther is a very good score. It could easily win for best score. I believe I've put Black Panther at #1.
Yeah, I think I have 2 as well. But I did find some of the voiceover work in this film very on the nose, like show don't tell. There's a lot of awkward exposition and setups, especially when we move into the second act of the film.
It's
I'm nitpicking at this point. Essentially, like, this isn't a bad movie. Have I seen movies that deal with these particular themes that this film's talking about? Have they been done better in other films? Absolutely. I could give a list of other films right now that I think talk about this and do it better. And as you said, it's inherently forgettable. At least with Moonlight, like, I didn't love Moonlight. You definitely liked Moonlight more than I did, but even talking about it now, like, however many, like, 2 years on now, has it been?
Yeah,
because it was Shape of Water last year that one, wasn't it? 2 years on now, we're still finding something to talk about Moonlight, and I can still remember it, and I can still pinpoint scenes. I'm not going to remember this film by next week, because we've got a lot of movies to watch in between then. As soon as I get, like, the next couple of movies out of the way, I'm going to forget this movie entirely. And I can't initially say it's a good movie if that's the case. Like, in my opinion, a good movie is a movie that, you know, stays with you, says something, and this movie does say something, but it doesn't say it in a new, intriguing way. It doesn't say it in a unique way that perhaps a film like Black Klansman did, for example, which was very unique. So can I recommend this film? Like, if you're a fan of Barry Jenkins, if you liked Moonlight and you liked his direction, then I say, sure, check it out. But there are a lot of other better movies this year at the Academy Awards.
Best way of putting it is, if you were to watch all of the films nominated for Best Picture this year, maybe watch this one last. If you don't have the time to watch it, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
We haven't seen some films that have been nominated for Best Picture yet. But what we can say from those films is they at least intrigue us. We know there's going to be talking points from them. And this film has 0 talking points. It's really, really difficult to pin something down. And it's one of those films where it's weird. The acting isn't awful. It's not fine. Like, it's well directed.
Yeah.
The cinematography is really, really nice in some parts. The dialogue's really good in some parts, especially that one scene with the family feud at the start. But it kept on track with that. And wow, that scene really stood out as being the only scene that maybe I'll remember at the end. But other than that, it just fell so flat. And would I recommend it? Probably not. No, unless you're watching all the Oscar films, it's pointless. You may as well just skip this one over. There are way more interesting films from the Oscars this year.
And alas, we are completionists, so we're kind of bound to the fact that we have to watch as many of these films as possible. But yeah, I've said everything we can on this movie, so that'll do it for our review on If Beale Street Could Talk. Be sure to comment, subscribe, let us know what you thought of this movie. Did you like this more than we did? How would you compare it to Moonlight? Any of the other films that are at the Academy Awards this year that you want to talk about, please do drop us a comment. As I mentioned, I'll reiterate, please send us in your not nominations. What am I thinking of? Predictions, sorry. Your Oscar predictions, first choice and second choice for each of the categories. Send that into cinemasavvypodcast@gmail.com or at our Facebook. We really do want to get some of those in because it would be fun to keep the competition going through the actual night of the Oscars. In terms of other movie reviews that we'll be doing, I believe that we're going to be trying to knock out 2 reviews on Wednesday, both for Vice and Roma, 2 films which I still need to watch, so I need to get those done very quickly. Really looking forward to Roma. I'm loving everything that I've seen at the BAFTAs and of the clips of that. You've already seen that movie. And as I said, reaction videos, especially for the Super Bowl or the Super Bowl TV spots, they are coming, but I am having to, like, prioritize Oscar stuff now. So you will see those at some point. Go and check out my reaction video that I did for Aladdin earlier today, by the way. That was a good one. I think you guys will like that one. So that'll do it for us for right now. And until the next video, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.